All right, Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. Welcome to our Wednesday class, Yalkut Yosef. We are in the topic of a Seudah, learning about Netilat Yadayim. Last time we ended with the Kli, meaning we haven't began yet learning about the Kli, the actual vessel that we use to do the Netilat Yadayim, and that's what we'll focus on today, B'ezrat Hashem. What is a proper kili, a natlan? Can we use a plastic cup or a bag or whatever it is to do the netilah? Does it even have to come from a machine, or could it just be under the faucet? And maybe we'll also have time to talk about the water. Not every water is kosher for netilat yadayim, so we will see that as well, B'ezrat Hashem. So with your permission, we'll begin. Hakli, the vessel, the natlan that we use, everybody knows that it's common that it has two handles. There's a reasoning for that, B'ezrat Hashem. Nick, Baruch haba to you too as well. We are just beginning right now. Oh, who else is here now as well?
How
Oh,
are you? Hi.
Bruchim Habayim. All right, perfect.
Good to see you. Hi.
We're just beginning. We began the recording and we are starting right now regarding the kli, the natlan that we use for netilat yadayim. What is the requirement for the kli to be kosher? So the halacha is that kol hakelim kshirim. Any vessel that you use is kosher, but it cannot be that your friend fills up his hands with water and pours it on you, and that's like a netilat yadayim. Hands are not considered a kli. It has to be from an actual vessel, a kli to use to do the netilat yadayim. Another thing that it has to have is that it has to be able to hold a revi'it. Revi'it is about 3 ounces. So if it's a very small one that you keep on having to refill, then it doesn't do the job. It just occurred to me now, I don't know if you noticed on your flights to Israel recently, the El Al plane started putting natlanim inside the bathrooms. I wonder how big they are because they look very small. So anyway, if you go just for the bathroom, it's one thing. But if you want to do netilah for bread, I wonder if it holds 3 ounces. That's homework for me. B'ezrat Hashem b'li or any of you that is flying, have to find a way to measure that. But either way, that's the halacha. It has to be able to hold the revi'it. Even if it's a plastic cup, it's fine. A bag, however, is not fine, which means if it's a flimsy shape that doesn't hold on its own, that's not proper. It has to be something that has a clear shape, right? Now, what happens if a person doesn't have an atlan? He's on a trip with some friends in the desert. They slept in a tent, and now they don't have an atlan. They're out of cups. There's just some sort of spring of water next to them. What can they do? Do they do netilah, not do netilah? So
Sorry, how many ounces do you need to pour on your hand? I think you had it before. Maybe I missed the class.
Okay, very good question.
Fine with the 3 ounce amount.
Really, if you could somehow put both of your hands under the water and a revi'it will be poured on both of them at once, that would be enough. You wouldn't have to do the 3s. That's sufficient for netilat.
Right.
The custom is, says the Yalkut Yosef, and the custom is to do 3 on each hand. But the minimum water that is required is a revi'it. So if I'm going to put less than a revi'it, then I have to do the 3 times. But if I do more than a revi'it, Allah Akli, it would be sufficient to just do once on both hands. We still do that because that's our custom. But
wait, so if the kli it's less than a revi'it, you can do a few times, so it's good.
No, that's the chidush. That's the chidush that we're learning today. That the kli itself, even if let's say maybe I filled it half or whatever, that's a different story. But if it doesn't fill up to 3 ounces, it's not considered halachically a kli. Same thing, for example, with
kiddush. It's about the kli, okay.
Kiddush, we have to have a revi'it as an amount of kiddush. So if you find a very small cup of 1 ounce, and you say, listen, I'm going to hold 3 in my hand, I have a revi'it here, savri maranan, that's not sufficient. The kli has a measurement. In order to be called a kli to do kiddush, by the way, there's a big machloket between Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rabbi Feinstein, the rabbi of the U.S., former Alav Shalom, both of them Alav Shalom. If a plastic cup is sufficient for kiddush, we're going to segue a little bit, but the discussion is like this: is plastic sufficient for kiddush? Is it considered a kli? The Rav Feinstein holds that plastic is not considered a kli, and therefore he holds that you cannot even do kiddush with it, even if it would be bigger than a revi'it. No good. Comes Rav Ovadia and says no. Plastic today are considered a keli. There's big machlokot between them, and this has, it takes us to different understandings. I'll give you one example regarding the trays that let's say you go to a restaurant, right, and you want to take home. They give you this aluminum tray that you could use for heating, but you throw it out after, right? According to Rabbi Feinstein, that's a plastic. That's a kli chad pa'ami, we call it in Hebrew, a one-time use. A one-time use vessel, holds Rav Feinstein, is not a keli. Because it's not a kli, he says you don't have to tovel it in the mikveh.
You don't need to
You're
have it.
throwing it out. Rav Ovadia holds that those aluminum trays, even if you use them one time, they are considered a kli. And therefore, he would hold that you have to tovel them in the mikveh. So, right, our dishes that we eat before we eat them, we tovel in the mikveh. That's why if you look in the supermarkets in Israel, when you buy those aluminum trays, it has a kashrut on them. You may wonder, what do we need a kashrut? Who needs a kashrut? So not all the kashrut, but some kashrut specify that this was made in China. However, they found a way to make it as if an Israeli made it. If an Israeli makes the kli, it doesn't need tevilah. The only time you need to dip it in the mikveh before you use it is if a goy made it, right? So what do? They buy the not the whole factory, but the chain that makes these trays. They buy it, and then when it's made, it's considered like a Jew made it, and that's why it has a kashrut on it. We asked Rabbi Chaim, he's lenient in America and the States. He says we could use those kelim chat pa'amim. We rely on Rav Feinstein. However, as we are relying on Rav Feinstein would also say, since it's not considered a kli and it doesn't need a mikveh, he would also say that this is not considered a kli and we can't do kiddush with it. So, there's always room to be lenient. This is where the shoulders of the big rabbi comes in and tells us what we can or cannot do. But bottom line, according to Rav Ovadia, this would be perfect for kiddush.
Sorry, Ziv. So for the mikveh, if something is manufactured in Israel, we don't have to go to the mikveh?
Yeah, if it's manufactured by a
Oh,
Jew.
wow. That's another chidush.
But there's very few things that are made in Israel. There's one company that makes glass bottles. They're called Phoenicia. And if you see their bottles, at the bottom, there's like a pay for the letter Phoenicia. But all the other glasses are made China, whatever. Nothing is made in Israel these days. It's just not economic. So, almost everything needs a mikveh, even if it's an Israeli company who makes the kelim over here. So we dip them. So again, you don't have to dip every single thing. If it's made from wood or made from plastic, it doesn't need a mikveh, right? One day, hopefully, we'll get to these halachot as well. But basically, we're talking about porcelain, we're talking about glass, we're talking about metal items.
So not if it's an Israeli company, only if it's made in Israel.
If it's made by Jews or if the Jews bought the factory, even though it's outside of Israel and it's owned by Jews, also, yeah.
Okay.
That's one of the loopholes that they do to get a kashrut on the kelim chat pa'amim, on these aluminum trays that they sell in Israel in the supermarkets. They buy.
So I'm saying, if it's an Israeli company, but if it's an Israeli company, even if they manufacture in China, there is no need for mikveh.
If the owner of who made it is Israeli, then it doesn't need a exactly. All right. So where were we? About the kli. So we said that the kli has to have the ability to hold the revi'it. If it doesn't hold the revi'it, it's not considered a kli. That's how we got the plastic. If according to Rav Feinstein, if it's not also a firm material, it's also not considered a kli. But that's a different story. For netilat yadayim, even if it's plastic, Rav Ovadia and Yalkut Yosef, which is who we're following in this class over here, would say that it's sufficient as long as it holds 3 ounces, which is a revi'it. Another thing that you need, sometimes you look at the natlan, sometimes you have it in shul, it fell, it has a little crack, but you still fill it up with water and you could use it, not a big deal. What's the halacha? Is the crack a problem? So you have to ask yourself, is this crack big enough that if I leave this natlan inside a pool of water, would the natlan get filled up from the water? If it's a hole that water can come in from the outside to the inside, it's posel, it makes the kli not valid to use for netilat yadayim. But if it's like a crack, but no water is coming out, then it's not pasul. So then the criteria is whether it holds the water and nothing from outside could come in or not, right? But if it does have a hole, especially if it has it in the area where you fill up the water on the bottom, some would say that if the hole, let's say there's a little hole on the natlan, but it's all the way on top, but over here I still have 3 ounces, then it won't be a problem. Another thing that we need for the water is that it would come mikoach adam velo me'elehem, from the strength of a person and not from its own. So if you see a spring of water or Niagara Falls and you want to come and do al netilat yadayim in Niagara Falls, you could say maybe this mountain is like a kli. But the answer is it's coming on its own. There's no man doing anything for it. So you cannot do the netilah over there. Of course, if you have no source of water, better to do that, but you wouldn't say the beracha netilat yadayim, okay? By the way, what happens if someone is in the desert and he doesn't have water at all. It's a 2-hour walk now to get water. But he has a sandwich and he's hungry. Is he allowed to eat the sandwich? What can he do? Important halacha. You know, Nick? How?
I think rub on sand, rub your hands on the dirt, and then
So
bracha.
we learned rubbing our hands on the dirt. That is the key that we give for someone that did asher yatzar. He went to the bathroom and now he doesn't have water. Yinagev b'milei de menake. Rub it with something that causes it to be clean. They're right. That would allow you to continue learning Torah, etc. Regarding bread, let's remember. Why am I reminding you this question? Because I want all of us to remember why. Let's see who remembers from class 1 on Yalkut Yosef. Why do we even need to do Netilat Yadayim when we're about to eat bread? Who remembers?
You can hold it with a bag or something, but I don't know. That's
Okay.
That's an easy way out, but that doesn't solve the Netilat issue.
All right, but why? No, but why? Okay, so I'll remind you. Easy answer: cleanliness. You just be clean before you eat. But the deeper answer and the real answer is because the Kohanim and Bet HaMikdash, when they would get a terumah, a gift from the people, they would have to eat it in a pure manner. How do you purify yourself? You wash your hands. So what do we want from us today? There's no Kohanim. The only reason we wash our hands before we eat bread is so that the Kohanim remember that they need to wash their hands before they eat bread when the Bet HaMikdash will be built. That's the reason. So what do we do here? I don't have a way to wash my hands. I'm in the desert. Tells you, use like William was saying, use a bag or use a tablecloth, use a napkin. Don't make direct contact with the bread. What am I helping by doing that? If I don't make direct contact, then I'm not touching the bread. Then the fear that the tumah from my hand will go into the bread, meaning for the Kohanim, not really for me, but that's why we're doing it. It doesn't exist anymore. So we're creating some sort of barrier between my hand and the food, and you could do that. So it's not like a tchila. Anytime you want to eat bread, you don't feel like washing, you can't say, I'll eat it from the bag, I won't touch it. No. But if you were stuck, there's a leniency that you will be allowed to put some sort of separation between your hand and the item, and then you could say, Motzi lechem min haaretz, and eat it. How deep do I need to wash my hands? Is it sufficient, like on Yom Kippur, right? We go to the bathroom, we wash our hands until kishre etzbo, over here. So, la halacha, the best way to wash your hands is until the joint of here, the bottom joint. That's really where the halacha requires you to do it. And also, spin your hand, meaning when you're pouring, don't just stay like that because this will get wet, but here will stay dry. So the recommendation of the Yalkut Yosef is while you're pouring, spin a little bit so the water touches your whole palm. Okay, because if some areas of your palm maintain dried, then the tumah never moved from them. So now if a drop touches from the area that you did wash and goes down onto the dry part, it's causing it to be impure again. So therefore, make sure your hands are completely wet. That's likatchila. He says b'diavad, if someone washed just like a Yom Kippur, even until up to here, that would still be sufficient to say al netilat yadam. And another recommendation that he gives us is that before we're about to use the natlan, don't use a vessel that's soaking wet. Because if it's soaking wet, then when you took it, when you held it, your hand is now wet. What's the problem with my hand being wet when I do netilat yadayim? The water is something that is ma'avir tum'ah, like we learned with the 7 things that you dip and you have to wash your hands. Water has the ability to be ma'avir tum'ah from the liquid, etc. So if your hand is wet, if I pour a revi'i 3 ounces at once on the hand, really it's not a problem. But if the hand was wet and where I pour a little bit at each time, so there wasn't sufficient amount to purify the hand in the first time, and then you're in trouble because until you get to the revi'it, it kept on getting tamen. You needed the big amount. So if your hand is a little moist when you're doing the netilah, make sure that the first pour has 3 ounces. But ideally, if it's dry, hold the natlan while it's dry. Now we'll see, B'ezrat Hashem, how we do it. I'm sure you all know, but I'm just going to remind you, how do we wash our hands for bread? We hold the natlan in our right hand. We fill it up, and after it's full, we transfer it to the left hand. The left hand goes 1, 2, 3. Transfer to the right, 1, 2, 3. Or should I say 1, 2, 3? All right. Remember the spinning so that the hand completely gets wet.
Does it matter if you're lefty or righty or no?
It does not matter. That's a good question, and I'll tell you why it does not matter. Because the Zohar says Why are we doing this? What's the idea of transferring from the right to the left? As I'm sure you all know, this is a concept in Judaism. Right represents mercy. Like we say in the Tachanunim, because your right is open to receive those that do teshuvah. Right is considered rachamim, and left is considered judgment, considered din. So what are we doing in Netilat Yadayim? We are filling it up with our right hand, and we're giving it to our left. We're saying to our left hand, come and serve the right, which means judgment, come be the servant of the mercy. Let the mercy be above you. So the idea is that the right is more important. That's why the left is serving it. Okay? So because of that, that answers your question. What if I'm a lefty? You're a lefty, it doesn't matter. It matters what is considered mercy. Right is always mercy. For a lefty, left is not mercy. It's still going to be right. According to the Kabbalah, that's the right way to do it. And of course, as we said, the custom is to do it 3 times. I wrote to myself here in parentheses because I looked in the little letters under the Yalkut Yosef in the commentaries to see why is the custom to do it 3 times. I couldn't find an answer. If one of you does find an answer, I would love to learn from you. So far, all I've seen is that that's the custom. Wonder how.
Dave, if the first time, the first of the 3, it's already a revi'it, the other 2 they can be a little bit, they can be less water, or there's no amount.
If the first was revi'it, it means that you're
That's
done.
it. You're
done. You want to do continue because of the custom.
On each hand, though. Revi'it.
Yeah, meaning if you would put both of them together and get a revi'it slash both of them, that would also be enough.
But how you do that?
It's hard, but let's say your friend filled up the Natlan and he's pouring it on you and it has
your friend. Yeah.
If let's say you're in a place where all you have is a revi'it, I would probably do that. I would give it to somebody and I would put both my hands and I would try to get him as wet as I can. Halachically, I'm covered. I did revi'it on my hand. But if I try to do from side to side, that would also be fine. As long
but if the kli can take the revi'it, but you put less water than revi'it, it counts still or no?
Good question. But you're gonna have to do it a few times.
Yeah, you do it 3 times, but each time it's not a revi'it.
That would be okay. Even though I don't know why you would do that, because anyway you have to do it a few times.
There's people online think one of the fastest and this, and you just do it 3 times each less than revi'it.
Right.
As long as the total is more than a revi'it.
The requirement of the Yalkut Yosef is that the kli yachol lachzik, that it is able to hold 3 ounces of revi'it, it's considered a kli. What are we learning? We're learning about what makes this guy kosher. We're not learning about the water. We're learning about the kli. You want to be kosher? We need you to be able to hold revi'it. All right. Yeah. So that was the kli. Okay, we have 10 minutes, so we're going to learn about the water now. You asked about the water, so that's a good pathway to get into the water. What is water that is considered kosher water for Netilat Yadayim? So first of all, a water that has changed its appearance is not kosher for Netilat Yadayim. So if the natural color of water is something and now you did something, you poured ink into, I don't know what you did, and now, the color is not the same anymore, the appearance is not the same anymore, it's not kosher for Netilat Yadayim. However, says the Yalkut Yosef, if let's say you have, you took water from the ocean, all right, or some sort of mikvah or something like that, and there's dust in the water. So now the appearance doesn't look like water. He said that would still be kosher to do netilah. Why? Because eventually, if you would wait, the dust will sink and it will have appearance of water, as opposed to the ink that completely changed it and it's not going to be the same anymore. Because the water is going to eventually go back, even though it didn't happen yet, right now it's okay. By the way, there's a similar topic to this regarding if we are allowed to use a frozen challah for hamotzi. I have one that is warm that I'm about to eat, but I want to have lechem mishneh, so I want to bring one from the freezer. I bring it from the freezer. Can I do hamotzi? There's 3 opinions about this. One opinion says, no, it's frozen. You're not able to eat it. How could you consider lechem mishneh? Another opinion says, you can only eat it if until the end of the meal, then the bread will defrost. But it's not defrosted now. I can't even eat it. No. If eventually, until the end of your meal, it's going to become worthy of eating, then it could be lechem mishneh. By the way, the third opinion, which is the opinion that we follow, Rav Ovadia, says no problem. You don't have to wait. You don't have to do anything. Even if it's completely frozen, you can do lechem mishneh with it. No problem. Why? He has a beautiful reasoning. His reasoning is because if you ask 100 people right now, what is this? What is this thing? This is challah. This is bread. It's frozen over. People call it challah. It's considered challah. It's considered bread, and therefore you could use it for hamatzi. Anyway, back to our topic. So the water that is kosher for the Netilat Yadayim is water that their appearance did not change. But if the appearance is different now, but eventually it's going to go back to where it was, that would still be kosher for Netilat Yadayim. Now, and this is going to surprise Johnny. Prepare to be surprised. Mayim shena'asu bahem mel'acha. Water that we did some sort of action with them. For example, your baby bottle is frozen, and you want to put it in water so that it gets a little warmer for the baby. Right? The water is clean. It never touched anything. Can I use this water for Netilat Yadayim? Says Yalkut Yosef says no. This is considered water that an action was done with them. They don't look different. Nothing happened to them. You use this water for something, it's already pasul for Netilat Yadayim. Right? That's one example. Another example that he gave is back in the day, you had a scale, or you go to the market, they had like a moznaim scale where you put weights on one side, and then on the other side the fruits. Oh, how much does this weigh? 1 pound, 2 pound, etc. Says if you would take a bottle of water and use it as a scale because you know this water has 1 pound, you want to give him 1 pound of nuts. That's considered that you did an action with this water. If you did that, that water is pasul for Netilat Yadayim. It cannot be that the water was used for something. It's called mayim she'asu bahem mel'acha. Water that you used for some sort of action, that would not be okay. Third example that he brings is if you used water just to leave your vegetables inside so that the heat doesn't make them dry. Let's say you want to eat them in a few hours. Okay, I'll leave them in water. They're going to stay moist and then later take them. Again, the water was used for some sort of purpose. That would not be kosher. What about water in the aquarium for the fish? Is that considered kosher water? Interesting question. I would think off the bat, probably not. I'm using the water for the fish, right? Maybe, I mean, if we were talking about using water. But Yalkut Yosef says a beautiful chidush. He says, no. Because the water over there are not doing some sort of change in the water by putting the fish into it. It's just there to maintain the life of the fish. You're not doing an action with the fish. You're just maintaining a standing point. The fish is alive now. You give him water to stay alive. You're not trying to defrost water that is hot or cold, or you're not trying to weigh something. You're just keeping a situation that is standing over here. And I'm waiting for a question. What's the question right now? So the question is, what about the example that he gave with leaving vegetables in water? We are not changing anything. We are just maintaining the vegetables to be moist like they were before. I would think that that's this, if you're saying fish is okay because I'm just maintaining their life. Vegetables also, if I leave water with them, I'm just there to maintain the status of the vegetables. And maybe I'm allowed to do netilah with that water. Yosef talks about this. He says, no, because when I left vegetables in water, not only did I maintain their current status, but I also added some moistness to them as opposed to fish. And therefore, vegetables in water, you can't use the water. Fish swimming in the water, take some of that water to do netilah, that would be allowed for Netilat Yadayim. So it's a far case, but I thought it was funny and interesting to learn.
Rega, but what about if inside the aquarium, inside the fish tank, there is plants and stuff like that? They also stay moisturized because of the water.
Okay, now you're asking a good question. What if there are other items over there? So I think we need to use that math. Is the water over there to maintain a certain status and not adding at all? So you use your own understanding. If there's something in there that the water is adding to it, then it would.
So you cannot use it.
But if it's an artificial piece of plastic plant that usually that's what they use in the water, it's not really adding anything to it. But if we would say that it is a live, I don't know, whatever you have to consider. He doesn't open it up, but I get your question. All right. Now, what about water that was sitting and all of a sudden a dog came and started licking and drinking from it? Is that kosher water for, or an animal, a cat, whatever it is? You drank from it. Is it kosher for netilah or not? So says the Shulchan Aruch. First we'll bring the Shulchan Aruch, then we'll bring by Yalkut Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the former chief rabbi. The Shulchan Aruch from 450, 500 years ago, he says that it would be fine. There's no problem with that. The fact that the dog drank from it is not posel, doesn't make it not kosher. But the Yalkut Yosef says that it's better to be strict because it's not worthy to use water for Netilat Yadayim that an animal drank from. So try to avoid it. It's not worthy, right? And why is he bringing this? Because there's a Tosefta. There's some sort of source that says that it's forbidden, but only in Sh'ata Dechat. Only if you have no other water, then you would do that, right? But this is only about an animal that is impure, like a dog, or a pig even says. But if chicken drank from the water, he says, no question, you're allowed to. It's a pure animal that drinks from it is not a problem. The problem is when a dog...
Is a fish a pure animal?
Most fish are pure.
Okay.
If you have a baby shark in there, yeah, but I don't know if they drink. They drink? The shark drinks?
No, I'm not worried about the drinking. I'm more concerned about the excretion from the fish, because they do give out excretion in the water, you know?
Ah, right. Yeah, you didn't regard that. It's a good question. I hear what you're saying. But again, so let's go back to where we started. The water, did it change its appearance? We said that if I'm going to hold it down and it's going to sink, the water is still there. So technically, we're not in a problem. But if it's an impure animal, maybe we could also say, like says Yalkut Yosef, that it's not worthy. But are we allowed? Yeah, it doesn't differentiate. It says if the dog or a pig came and licked from it, then that would be a problem. We have 1 more minute. All right. Ocean water. You're in Miami on the beach. What do you want to do? You have Netilah, you don't do Netilah. So the answer is that if you want to wash your hands, ocean water, you cannot wash your hands in them because they're not worthy even for a dog to drink from. So you can't fill a cup from the ocean and do Netilah. A dog wouldn't drink that water. However, you are allowed to dip your hands in the ocean. See, if you separated the water from the ocean, you can't use that water. But if it's still in the ocean and you just do dip it like that, and you dip them in there, and you even say the beracha. We learned that if someone said by mistake, al tevilat yadayim, because he's tovel, he's dipping his hands, he's not doing netilah, he's dipping, and you change the beracha. Even if you change the beracha, it's okay. But when you do it, don't change the beracha. If you're going to dip your hands in the ocean, dip them, but still say al netilat yadayim.
Ziv,
I'll just finish and then I'll hear your question. It says, however, if it's a spring, all right, meaning if it's a spring of water, it's a lower level, it's also fine as long as when you dip your hands in there, your hands are fully covered. But if half of your hand is covered and it's not high enough, then it won't be good. Yeah, go ahead.
So isn't a woman allowed to dip in the ocean like as a mikveh?
Yeah.
Doesn't that purify her? So I'm wondering
why is your question not a problem? I hear your question. You're saying if she's allowed to dip, then why can't I do Netilat Yadayim? The answer is you can dip in the ocean. You dip in your hands and it's sufficient for Netilat Yadayim. But you're not allowed to take out water from the ocean and do Netilat, just like a woman can't take out water from the ocean and dip into that. That won't be kosher. It has to be attached to the live ocean or the live spring or whatever it is for you to use it.
I see. So if it was a live stream, she could also take that water out to a bathtub. I know we're going, sorry if we're going off topic.
No. For a woman, she has to be inside the actual water to do them. So it's not 100%, equivalent. But a woman for a mikveh, actually the Ben Ish Chai talks about this. A woman that was in a place where she didn't have a mikveh and she wanted to dip, and gave her a very interesting. Let's finish with this. I don't want to keep everybody. An interesting recommendation. He said, we're going to dip in the public. Everybody's going to see a lady that's undressed in the water. So the recommendation that he gives, build some sort of machine that covers you completely. And when you put it into the ocean, it starts filling from the ocean. And then if it's fully full, you go in there with your clothing. Then the lady takes off her clothing, she dips, then she puts her clothing back on and she comes out. Why is that kosher? Because it filled up from the ocean, yeah, but it's still connected to the ocean, so it's considered as if it's live, and then she could do. But the halachot of the mikveh are a little bit.
Sorry, but so we don't have to use a kli with the ocean water? I don't get it.
With the ocean water, it's not that you don't have to. You can't. You can't use a kli, right?
But you're allowed to just put your hands inside.
You would be allowed to dip your hands in there.
Why? Because it's a natural thing. It's a spring, it's a natural.
Something that's over there natural, it's like a pool. Or yeah,
No, pool, gun pool? No, pool,
no,
no.
it's a pool is
Oh.
a wrong rand translation, but it's like an existing body of water that is natural. It's not an unnatural one. If it's unnatural, like you made the pool, then different subject.
In the bracha would be netilat or
Go
tvilat.
ahead, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Yes, Nick?
The bracha would be al tvilat or netilat.
So the bracha would stay al netilat yadayim because that's what people use. If someone by mistake said al tevilat yadayim because he didn't know the halacha, he will still yotzei b'chova and it would be fine.
I have a few more questions. I'm gonna text you, Ziva. I don't want to keep it. I'm not still very clear on this ocean thing.
Okay.
Why yes? Why not?
Okay. Bezat Hashem, we'll try to answer. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye bye.